where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun. The sagebrush whispers, the rivers hum. This land's a story just begun. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. Boots hit gravel and the prairie sings. With every hoofbeat, the frontier rings. From ranchers' hands to miners' veins, the spirit of the West remains. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. So come ride with me through the dust and time. Find the soul of Wyoming beyond the fence line, beyond the fence line. Beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line, where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun.
Hey, good morning, Wyoming. Happy Monday, January 12th. Great to have you here on Wyoming Beyond the Fence Line, week 2 of the show. So glad you guys are here joining us. And today we're going to talk about, wow, what a crazy week last week in Wyoming, right, you guys? So much news, so many things going on, from Trump endorsing our current superintendent of public education for Wyoming governor to the abortion ruling in the Wyoming Supreme Court. And the list goes on and on, right? So we're going to cover all that stuff today. And first thing we're going to start out with, well, for me this morning, let me grab a little sip of my tea here. Oh, by the way, hope you guys had a nice weekend. I am Joseph Kibler, write-in candidate for Wyoming governor in 2026, outside the echo chambers to be something different for the people. You see, so often we're caught in these political echo chambers that we can't be objective and speak the truth without fear of retribution from the party, right? And so that's why I decided to run as a write-in candidate for Wyoming governor. But let's stop talking about that, because that is not what today is about. Today is about Wyoming, and we are going to talk about all of the different things that happened last week, starting with kind of the top issue, which was, of course, on Tuesday, the Supreme Court's ruling that elective abortion is health care. Now, you might want to know everywhere where I stand on that issue. Last Tuesday morning, unbeknownst to me, I actually did a live show on life, because I think life is, and the value of life is, quite frankly, the root issue in our culture today that's causing so many of the things that we face, so many of the challenges that we have. And so go back and look at Tuesday's episode on that. So let's go ahead and talk about this decision that the Supreme Court made a little bit more thoroughly, since I didn't know it was being made last week on Tuesday when I did the show on live. You know, in 2022, the issue of abortion was given back to the states by the Trump administration. And many states brought that straight to the people for a vote. And many states well, can't speak this morning. It must be Monday, huh, you guys? Many states eliminated abortion through vote of the people. In Wyoming, we decided that we would try to legislate the issue. And we created a couple of different pieces of legislation to sort of ban abortion from a legislative standpoint, and kind of go around these different creative ways around the Constitution, and just around just putting a vote to the people. And so I would call on, first of all, I don't believe that elective abortion is healthcare. And I think that's an important thing to define in Wyoming. So there are a couple of things that I would call on the Wyoming legislature to consider in dealing with this issue of abortion in Wyoming, elective abortion in Wyoming. Non-elective abortion is a separate issue. You can see my different statements on that if you want to take a look on that. So, number one, vote to the people. Let's get a constitutional amendment for abortion, and let's give the vote to the people. I don't know why we've been timid about not just giving this vote to the people in the first place. Maybe we think it wouldn't pass. I'm not really sure why we're not just giving this vote to the people. Number one. Number two, define healthcare. Define healthcare. I think that would be really, really a critical part of taking care of that. A statute in the Wyoming Constitution that says, you know, adults have the right to, choose all of their own healthcare. Define healthcare. To me, healthcare is to treat illness, injury, life-threatening diseases, situations, things like that. Guess what? Pregnancy is not a disease. Okay? It's not an illness. It's not an injury. Okay? And again, non-elective health abortion, another issue. We can talk about that. You can look at my other statements on that. So let's do that. Let's define what healthcare is. And a lot of people brought up, well, Joseph, what about mental health? Well, mental health is mental health. I'm not talking about mental health. And so we're not getting into that issue. I don't deny that, and that should continue as it is. So that was the big issue last week. Encourage you to watch my Tuesday episode last week where I talked about life. That's so important, you guys. This issue of life in our culture ties into so many things. Our kids are depressed. They don't feel valuable. They don't feel worth. They don't feel purpose. It ties into how crime in our state. It ties into that mental health component of things, this value of life issue. So, anyways, I'll say it a last time. Go listen to last Tuesday's episode. Obviously, wrapping that issue up, I am pro life. Life begins at conception, regardless of how it began. And that is the issue of life. And of course, that was a really big issue last week in Wyoming. Now, I would say, arguably, probably the best cut of the year so far, and it's already very short into the year, was the spat between Governor Mark Gordon and Secretary of State Chuck Gray at the State Land and Investment Board meeting. And I have got that recording for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and play it, and you guys can hear it for yourselves what happened, and maybe we'll pause it as we go along the way there, and I'll share with you kind of my thoughts on that. So let me get this shared up here. I'm going to go ahead and share what actually happened here. Oh, let me make sure real quick that audio, you guys are going to be able to hear that audio on that tab as well. Okay, go ahead and do that. And here we go. State Land and Investment Board meeting. Let's listen to it.
The Wyoming Attorney General is appointed by you and serves at your pleasure. And I would ask you to please instruct the Attorney General not to undercut the will of the board over the next 4 weeks.
And Mr. Secretary, I'm happy to do that. I want to explain that the Attorney General and I talked about the issues that were made unclear by Judge Peasley's inverted ruling. It may be the right one, and I'm happy to do that. But the reason why we wanted to make sure it was clarified is so that we didn't end up with crazy issues. I told him that, in my mind, we should probably think about that. He said what he said, which is it's the Attorney General's job to represent the state. I will tell him that he cannot undercut the will or the decision power of this board.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there real quick. So, Wyoming Secretary of State Chuck Gray says, "Hey, I would really like you to tell the Secretary's, of the Attorney General's office not to interfere with the will of this board." In regards to, by the way, just so you know, they're talking about a windmill land lease, a big windmill land lease project. I think it's up in Natrona County. And Secretary of State Chuck Gray, at the end of the meeting, wanted to make some motions, and they determined that it really wasn't the appropriate time to make the motions because it was a special meeting, and they would do it in the regular meeting. So, Secretary of State Chuck Gray makes this request to the governor. You heard right there that twice the governor said that he would tell the Attorney General's office to honor the Secretary's request. So twice the governor did answer the Secretary's question. And then let's listen to how it continues.
In the next, even in the intervening period before we have that.
Yeah, and I don't understand what he would do.
There are some things he could do. And I don't.
Okay, so the chairman, the governor, says yes, he'll do it. So Secretary of State asks again. I think he asked 3 times at this point. Yes, we're going to go ahead and do it. We'll take it. The chairman's not sure what the Attorney General would do, but the Secretary feels that there are some things that the Attorney General's office could do. But here it continues, and then, of course, it begins to digress.
I give ideas.
And I think to cast aspersions on the Attorney General, former justice, is, I just don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, hold on, please. I take deep umbrage at you saying I cast aspersion.
I take
He stepped in
you.
and
Step outside. You want to step outside?
Are you threatening me?
No, I'm asking if you want to step outside.
Are you threatening me? I've never seen anything.
Mr. Chairman.
That is the standard.
Mr. Chairman.
Look, Mr. Chairman, back to the issues. Please stop interrupting. Mr. Chairman, I just asked.
Okay, so Secretary of State asks the governor a question, asks the chairman a question. Chairman answers the question twice and in thoroughly. Secretary of State continues to press the issue, and the chairman answers the secretary a 3rd time. And then there's casting of dispersion, on the Attorney General's office, and then blah, blah, blah. And now, of course, the governor asks the secretary to step outside. Now, we all know, in the code of the West, the Wild Wild West, what that means when do you want to take this outside, right? We know the inference of that. After the governor answered the secretary 3 times and the secretary continued to push, it did escalate to what you see here. And we'll continue and listen to the recording.
That we have the Attorney General not undercut the will of the board in the next month before we hear this.
And that was answered.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
And then they go to talk about,
Yes. And
they're talking about, and then they go into talking about how there are some bills out there but I think it is for electing the Attorney General, which, by the way, if I were elected governor and the people of Wyoming wanted the Attorney General to be an elected position, I would be in favor of that. I would be in favor of that, the will of people, to go ahead and honor that. So you heard the headlines last week on this issue, but you may not have heard the context. And I think that that's why it's really important to listen to the context of this. And I would argue this, and with all respect to Secretary Gray and Governor Mark Gordon, there was going to be a soundbite in this meeting, right? Secretary Gray asked the question. The question was answered. The question was answered well 2 or 3 times. But I think Secretary of State Chuck Gray wanted to get a soundbite out of this meeting. If I'm being honest, if you listen to the recording and how the dialogue went and then how it digressed, you really would want to go, okay, let me look at this logically. What really happened here? And we were seeking, we wanted to get a soundbite before the end of the meeting, and we got it. But I hope you'll listen to the context because I think it's really, really important. All right, what else happened in Wyoming last week? Well, we know that Trump made kind of a surprise endorsement. I will tell you. So obviously I'm running for governor, and there are a lot of things that I'm expecting, that, political analysts are expecting, but this one was not thoroughly expected. And that was the endorsement of President Trump for our current superintendent of public education, Megan, for Wyoming governor. Now, we expect probably this week we will probably hear her announcement for governor. I would be very, very surprised if she does not run. That makes this race infinitely more interesting. And on Thursday, you guys, no, actually not Thursday, next week, I will be talking about elections in Wyoming. Thursday, we'll actually be talking about taxes. So what else happened in Wyoming last week while we were hanging out? Well, we know that Governor Gordon recommended the removal of the Weston County clerk for, not doing her job correctly. So that's one thing that happened last week. We know that lawmakers last week, I'm not sure who all met last week. Because of the abortion decision, lawmakers met last week talking about shrinking the Wyoming Supreme Court. That's a very interesting issue, right? So we don't get our way on something, so let's figure out a way to change it so that we get our way. Okay, let me back up. First of all, I'm pro-life. I wish the court had made a different decision on the abortion bills, but the court has one job, and that is to uphold the Constitution. One might argue that the Constitution says what it says. That's another argument. But, so now we're going to change the court? Okay. All right, I can hear that. Why would we even be considering that? I don't really know because, boy, if the left did that, or non-conservatives were doing that, we would be up in arms. Wait, you're going to change the court because you couldn't get... Let's do it the right way, you guys. Okay, and by the way, they decided not to take action on that. I should be clear. It's my understanding that the private meeting about shrinking the Wyoming Supreme Court, they decided not to do that. So have that. And I understand, We are pro-life. We want a pro-life Supreme Court. I can understand that. We have three branches of government for a reason. Uh, do I like it? Again, do I like the crux of the decision personally? No, I don't, because I'm pro-life. But that's something to think about. Okay, so I think it's pretty important to consider that. Um, okay, another thing we got from the State Land and Investment Board meeting was this huge data center going in near Cheyenne. This thing is not just huge, it's massive. 2.5 gigawatts of power. No, 2.5, 2.7, something like that. Let me pull it up. 2.7 gigawatts of power. This data center, this single data center going into Wyoming, into Cheyenne, the Cheyenne area here, will use triple the power that the entire state uses. And Joseph, you're going, Joseph, how in the heck are they going to power that thing? Well, first of all, Wyoming produces 12 times more power than it uses, but we're going to start using that up a whole lot with these data centers. But they are also building, in partnership, they are building a large natural gas power plant next to this giant data center that's, again, going to use 3 times the amount of power used in Wyoming currently. Another issue that came up last week in Wyoming is there is a problem with our 911 infrastructure. It's aging. There's been outages. There's been fiber line failures. And this is definitely something we need to be looking at. And, this is where I believe, you've got to have that appropriation to the governor, and yes, some say, oh, it's a slush fund, right? It needs to be specific for things like this. When 911 is failing, we need to be able to have that slush fund, that appropriation that could be used to make sure that our critical infrastructure is not failing. And it ended up being that, it's a broken fiber line, but it also exposed how fragile our 911 system is. And so this happened last week. That's, really interesting. Another thing that came out of the Trump administration, and this is by far probably, this is a positive thing for Wyoming that came out of the Trump administration, was this rural health funding. I think some of you guys heard about that. We have $205 million that is aimed at stabilizing rural health in Wyoming. I have to step back from a principle standpoint on some of this stuff and go, this to me, life, health, safety, that's kind of like the role of government in my mind. Everything else, not the role of government. And boy, does government have its fingers in everything. That's a different topic. But I am thankful for this, for our rural health care, for our small communities that are struggling with access. Now, I want to know how this is going to be managed and administered. What I'm afraid of is bureaucracy and administration. How much of this $205 million is not going to get where it needs to go in rural healthcare services? How much of this is going to end up in administration and bureaucracy before it gets to the people? History tells me that a good deal of this will be wasted in those two areas, bureaucracy and administration, before it actually gets to our rural healthcare needs. So that would be one thing as governor that I would just not stand for. I want all 205 million of this to get to the people. And you know what? Maybe you need to have a small amount for bureaucracy and administration. Okay, you've got 5 million to administer this program. 200 million of it better go to the people. I think that's so important. And that is where bureaucracy, even in Wyoming, has gotten completely out of control. We just got to stop doing that. Let's see what else is going. What else went on in Wyoming last week? Maybe am I missing anything? You guys feel free to comment. I'm just trying to see what else. Oh, this is a good one. Cattle ranchers cheer the protein first dietary guidelines. Hey, we like that a whole bunch. Did you guys see the inverted pyramid that was provided by Mr. Kennedy and his office there, the Department of Health? Let me pull that up. I'm going to pull it up real quick. The new dietary pyramid. Pyramid. Let me pull that up. I'm going to show that to you guys. So they basically inverted the dietary pyramid to put all those proteins at the top. And so I'm going to pull that up real quick. I know it'll show up here. There we go. All right, let me pull this image up. I'll share it with you guys. I'm going to just do that, drag it to my desktop, and talk about this. So we're obviously really excited about this here in Wyoming, right? Big beef producers. There's more cows than people in Wyoming, and so this is a great thing for Wyoming. Here is the new dietary pyramid that was put out by the Department of Health. Very cool. So you can see we've got all these nice proteins, dairies, healthy fats up here in this upper left-hand corner, fruits and vegetables. You'll notice that all of our carbs kind of fell down here towards the middle. So we celebrated this in Wyoming this past week. Obviously, a great thing. Does not solve the challenges that our beef producers are facing, but that's another show. That's another conversation. But they did go ahead and release this, and of course, we're happy about that in Wyoming because we have cows, more cows than people, and so that's pretty exciting for Wyoming. Last week came out of the Department of Health, the federal level, so very, very cool. Let's see if there's anything else major that happened last week. We talked about, of course, we know Reed Rasner announced his run for U.S. House, to be our sole House representative. So that'll be Chuck Gray and Reed Rasner, and who knows? I'm sure there will be a couple more people that throw their hat in that race. That'll be interesting. Get your popcorn, guys. That should be fun to watch those two duke it out. Should be pretty interesting as well. So that is what happened last week in Wyoming. We talked about the issue of life, elective abortion. We took an actual look at the recording from the State Land and Investment Board between the dialogue between Mark Gordon and Chuck Gray. And the headlines that you saw might have been a little bit misleading based on the recording. I thought the governor did a good job overall in that meeting, but if you listen to the recording, the Secretary of State, Chuck Gray, kept pushing the governor until he would get that soundbite that he was looking for. The governor did answer his question. He answered it thoroughly. He answered it thoroughly twice. Then he answered it third time as a yes. And then, of course, we divulged into, hey, do you want to take this outside? So there you have that. We talked about a few other things like the massive data center coming into Cheyenne, and, of course, the new food pyramid and the upcoming races. Oh, Megan's from President Trump. Megan giving President Trump giving Megan the go-ahead on running for governor in Wyoming. So great show today, you guys. Great having you here today. Pray you guys are blessed this week. Going to be a windy week from what I saw in the weather this morning here in Wyoming. So what is coming up on the show this week? Tomorrow is probably tomorrow's a pretty important show, and here's why. I get an awful lot of people that ask me, Joseph, you anti-Trump? Sometimes I see you post things and you're not towing the line when it comes to the Trump administration. I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow in detail. I'm going to be talking about where I stand when it comes to President Trump, his administration, his policies, and where I stand really not only as a conservative, but as a Christian. And I voted for him 3 times, by the way. So have no doubt, in me in that area. But I think we need to be truthful and honest about what's going on in our culture, in our society, even at the federal level, because that does affect us here in Wyoming. So that's tomorrow's show. Wednesday, I'm going to do World News Roundup, so to speak. We're going to talk about what's going on in the world. We're going to talk about Greenland. We're going to talk about, probably Cuba and Venezuela. We're going to talk about the global policy, Iran, the things going on. And because you might go, Joseph, well, how does that affect? It affects us here in Wyoming, right? It affects our airmen, our National Guard, the folks who might end up deployed in some of these, world conflicts and things like this. So it's important for us to have that conversation. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about taxes. We're going to talk about property taxes. We're going to talk about estate taxes. We're going to talk about tax. We're going to talk about some of the bills coming up in this legislative session regarding taxes and stuff like that. So that'd be fun. And then on Friday, I'm going to talk about another Wyoming story, some wonderful folks that I met, and they shared their story with me of hopelessness and drugs and crime and prison, and how their lives turned around for the better. And it's really just a story of hope. And so we're going to be sharing that on Friday with you guys. It's a compelling story, and I look forward to sharing that with you guys. So Have a great week. God bless you guys. Let me see what my little devotion thing here says on January 12th. I'll share this with you guys as a closing thought. Before a man can express the Father's heart, he must know the Father's heart. And that was Mark Wiltis that said that, to know the Father's heart. That's my deepest desire. So with that, God bless you guys. Have a great Wyoming week, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye now.
That welcome sign on I-25, paint chip still standing proud. Ranch hands lean on rusty gates, reading weather in the clouds. Antelope on the edges, cold dust on our jeans. Four rigs blanking on the rim like a string of prairie dreams. Wyoming wind, you shove those semis sideways on the line, make a 20-foot wall of white in a single night. Drag those tumbleweeds till they're stacked up tight on the old barbed wire. Carry smoke from a branding fire. You steal my hat, you sting my skin, but I was raised by that Wyoming wind. Red dirt stuck in busted boots, pickup rattling down 14. Feedlot steam in the dim sunrise, snow geese cutting clean. L tracks in the timber, sagebrush oceans roll. We pull our hoods tight at the pump, the gust cuts through the soul. You push our trash clear to Nebraska, strip a billboard to the nails, slam a screen door off its hinges, shake the grain out of the rails. You whistle through those cold cars, howl across the powder rim. Every fence line, every windburn grin, got carved by you again. Wyoming wind, you shove those semis sideways on the line, make it 20-foot wall of white in a single night. Drag those tumbleweeds till they're stacked up tight on the old barbed wire. Carry smoke from a branding fire. You steal my hat, you sting my skin, but I was raised by that Wyoming wind. Red dirt stuck in busted boots, pick up rattling around 14. Feedlot steam in the dim sunrise, snow geese couldn't clean. Elk tracks in the timber, sagebrush oceans roll. We pull our hoods tight at the pump, the gust cuts through the song.